whispers and rumors that don't get reported. Stories I write that are often distorted. Got my notebook and pen, and I'm ready to listen. Tell me the truth, I'll consider your position. I've seen killers with eyes so cold and dead, and others go to prison because of what someone said, rotting away for the rest of their lives, leaving a hole here on the outside. Things are sad here on Earth, and it's no wonder why, when you consider the sociopaths who remain in charge. It's me who sees the system for all its flaws, and I usually start with the probable cause. My right hand is reading the probable cause. Welcome to The Probable Cause. This is a podcast covering the criminal justice system in Allen County, Indiana, northeastern Indiana, and sometimes even the state of Indiana when it applies. I'm your host, Jamie Duffy, a locally based journalist, and to my left over there is Michael McAlexander. He is our co-host and the Allen County Prosecutor. Also appearing on our podcast via the cell phone is my right hand. She's brave today. In 3 days, it will be the 9th angelversary of her son's death due to homicide. We didn't know it at the time, but I did respond to that scene. It was December 6th of 2016. And with her permission, we will post the photo that I took. It's very grainy, it's very blurry, but I tell her that is you in that photo. 9 years I've had that on my phone, and the night before Thanksgiving I looked at my photos, and again I realized that I saw my right hand, one of my best friends here in Fort Wayne, in that photo. So God bless you, and what you endured, no mother, no father should ever endure either. So here we go. I didn't know if you wanted to say anything, my right hand?
Just that it's been a long 9 years.
Yes.
I don't know. My mom's here. Do you want to say anything?
Not right at the moment, but it has been a long 9 years.
Yeah. And I don't suppose it gets ever any better, so.
No, it doesn't.
But I do remember that I met you shortly after it happened, and I do remember the initial pandemonium, or whatever you want to call it, that you went through, and you've been very brave.
I've been since diagnosed with cancer.
Yes, you have been. That was about a year ago, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Just about.
So, and I remember that too. So we're hoping that you will prevail over that. As we say in the prosecutor's office, you will prevail. And we know you will, actually. You've got good doctors. IU Health. Let's hear it for them.
From your lips to God's ears.
Right. Absolutely. Every night. Now, as you can see, we have a special guest here today. His name is Robert Duffy. And yes, he is my son. He is a human rights lawyer. He's visiting me for the holidays, and he came with his lovely girlfriend. We adore her, Eileen Solomon. For the moment, he is based out of D.C., where I think you'll find that a lot of human rights lawyers, can't say attorney, lawyers work. But first, as always, the courts. Mike, what have we got this week?
Sadly, a lot of nothing. We had 6 cases set for trial yesterday, and we locked in one, and then it kind of had some issues with some newly discovered evidence that came up.
No kidding.
Yeah. So they ended up continuing it. So we will not get any new cases done this week. And it's really unfortunate because we had a couple of an old leaving the scene traffic crash case that's over 4 years old that we've really struggled to get to trial. It's been continued. The defendant was pro se at one point, and it's just been kind of a long road. And it's Adam Mildred's case. So he probably won't be here. He's been working this case for 4 years, and he won't be here to try it.
Can you say who it is, or would you rather not?
I just soon as not mention the name. And we had another case that was a child molest case that's almost 4 years old.
This doesn't mean, are they still sitting there over in the Allen County Jail, or
Yes.
They are. So they've been in jail for 4 years.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I believe somebody absconded for a while.
Oh, absconded. How lovely.
So,
But you caught them.
yes, we usually do.
Yeah. You prevailed. That's the name. That's the word we're going to use today.
So there's some of that as we're heading in towards the end of the year. Next week, the prosecutors have their statewide annual conference in Indianapolis. So there aren't any trials set next week, and the following week is really the last week then that we'll have any trials going for the year, because next week is a 2-day week with Christmas, and then the following week is messed up with New Year's Day holiday.
Right.
So
it's been a while since I've been able to get cameras in the courtroom, and somebody asked me on one of the murder trials, hey, are you going to post it on YouTube, which flattered me a lot because I do like to do that, and apparently people like to watch it. I do the openings and the closings, and then every once in a while you'll get some individual who wants to take the stand for his own case, and that makes it really interesting. I've had a couple that were. A couple weeks ago, I covered the murder trial of Jalen Carpenter. He was convicted of 1 count of murder and using a firearm in the commission of a crime, and that can add another 20 years onto your sentence. He will be sentenced December 12th, so that will be something that takes place. I don't think that will be continued. The victim, John Peterson, was 19, and he was a signed basketball player at Manchester University here in Indiana, but he was home. There was no season that year because of COVID. It happened March 26th of 2021, and as you all we were all kind of on lockdown then, so he couldn't play basketball. The case went kind of cold until last year, when Carpenter was arrested, literally like a year ago. There was a dice game at Old Hands. Mike, have you ever heard of that place, Old Hands?
no.
I mean, I tried to find it, Googled it, nothing came up, but everybody's saying Old Hands. That must be a dice game term that, not being in that world, I don't know. Carpenter talked. Information led to his arrest, and I think someday we should probably talk about the witness protection program. Because I think it needs to happen.
There's certainly issues that we encourage people to come forward and testify, but there is a lot of fear out there. We do have some cases where witnesses or confidential informants have been threatened, or plots against them,
Or killed. Yeah.
So it's something we're certainly aware of. But we don't have an official program the way witness security with the federal government has.
I mean, there were a lot of people who were very worried. Right now, I don't know what the status of the situation is. So now let's go on to the world of human rights and the many violations therein that occur in this world. To me, it's unbearable when we start documenting the breadth of this scourge. So I would just want to start out before we turn to Rob. As I said, he is my son. What is exactly a human rights violation? And some of this is kind of boring and dry. Why don't I just give examples of human rights violations? Denying access to employment, education, or other services based on race, gender, religion, or other factors. Don't know what those other factors are. Do you want to chime in? What could the other factors be? Race, gender, religion?
In regards to your question, I mean, there's various different types of discrimination that are obviously covered under human rights violations. I think it depends a lot in terms of what exactly you're referring to. Obviously, classic categories of religious, ethnic violation. There are human rights treaties at the UN level and at the regional level that discuss different forms of discrimination.
Can you give us a specific example of where that's occurred?
Sure. There's the treaty called CEDAW, which is regarding the elimination of discrimination against women specifically. So there are different forms, different treaties will deal with different sorts of issues. But generally speaking, yes, discrimination is something that is dealt with within the human rights world in various different treaties and other sort of bodies.
So it also says freedom of expression, censoring speech, arresting dissidents and restricting the press. Well, right there, I can think of a couple of really great examples. I mean, I'm thinking about Argentina during the Los Desaparecidos, when they were rounding up students and torturing them and throwing them into the ocean after they broke their legs. I'm thinking about Russia. They don't seem to have any problem poisoning people or shooting them in the middle of the street or letting them die in prison. This is censoring speech, arresting dissidents, or restricting the press. Do you want to say anything about that?
With the press specifically?
Well, just freedom of expression. So,
Sure. I mean, again, obviously a really serious issue. I briefly spent time with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and in that,
the WHO Commission?
the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and in the time I spent there, I was focusing specifically on freedom of expression issues. You know, you can range anywhere from Venezuela to where dissidents are imprisoned and frequently tortured and killed in prison, to issues we have right here in the United States, where there'll be sort of more subtle forms of pressure on journalists that are speaking truth to power. So it's an issue that, again, exists globally, you know.
So when you work for these human rights organizations, how do you approach this problem? Does somebody come to you and say, boy, you really should be checking into this situation?
Sure. Well, I would just say,
We'll get it out of them one way or another.
Yeah, just kind of as a preface, I would say, you know, I'm very happy with the experiences I've had thus far. I would say I'm certainly in the early sort of stages of my career. But with that being said, there's different sorts of organizations that do different sorts of things. So if you look at an advocacy organization like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, a lot of what they're doing is documentation with partners on the ground, using the information that they have to sort of spur advocacy, whether it's at, you know, regional human rights bodies, the ICC, UN bodies, things to that extent, or within sort of just national political forums as well, at United States Congress, you know, really just wherever they can engage in advocacy. And then there are other sorts of legal advocacy that different sorts of organizations do. So, you know, it can depend on what the NGO is. There's one called Legal Action Worldwide that does...
Legal Action Worldwide.
Yeah, which does litigation in various different forms. They, you know, in national domestic proceedings, they get involved with lawyers on the ground, or they may submit something to the ICC. It really sort of depends what the issue is and what are the opportunities available. But those are organizations that engage more in legal advocacy, which is sort of a different kind of bucket of work that you can do.
So that sounds like a good way to do it, though, go through the courts.
Which courts is?
Yeah, okay, so
sure.
tell us, which courts? We want to know.
So there are a lot of different ways to engage in human rights advocacy. There's domestic lawyers, which I believe we were discussing before, Brian Stevenson. You can say that he's engaged in a form of domestic human rights work, if you'd like to say. It's not necessarily using treaty body language or something to that extent, but he's using the tools within the domestic United States system to engage in litigation for similar purposes.
Would that be considered civil rights litigation then? Because there's a differentiation between human rights and civil rights being the ones that are based on the laws of that country in which the violations are occurring.
Sure. I mean, I think you would start out by saying that human rights is really kind of an idea before anything else. You know, you really would go back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which is kind of a founding document, sort of a birthplace of what human rights is supposed to be about. And generally, as you were saying, they're fundamental rights that should be universally recognized.
So where was that created in 1948?
That was at the UN level with the UN General Assembly. So that's really kind of a birthplace of human rights and the sort of human rights movement. That spurred the development of UN treaty bodies and other regional organizations that kind of engage in efforts to promote those human rights in different ways. And then even if those are your goals, is to promote the human right of the right to life, the right to due process, things like that, those overlap a lot with domestic procedures that we have in the United States. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about trying to engage in human rights advocacy. I think, technically speaking, if you're talking about international human rights, you know, a common way you would do so is perhaps you would submit a petition before a UN treaty body, or you would submit a complaint to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, or the European Court of Human Rights if you're able to pursue action there. A caveat with that would just
I was going to say, how do you get your petition, accepted into that realm? It's
Sure.
like that, you might be somebody who's been through torture, genocide, extrajudicial killings, sexual violence, and slavery. Those are some of the things of violence and persecution. And at the same time, they have to monitor that and what do I want to say here?
Sure.
Justify what they're advocating for and investigating.
Sure. Well, I mean, the examples that you raised kind of also show how there's an overlap and blurring of the lines between what you would call international criminal law and international human rights law. International criminal law will deal with sort of grave abuses of human rights. You would think of things that constitute large-scale crimes, such as genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, things like that. At the strictly international human rights level, again, you're talking about things like rights to life, due process, right to privacy is considered a human right as well. So back to your previous question about pursuing actions before these regional and international bodies, they are generally perceived as a form of last instance. So what you would really need to do is something called exhaust domestic remedies. You would have to go through the courts in the United States, you would have to take it as far as you can, and then you would have to show these different bodies that you have essentially done everything that you've done and that you can do at the domestic level. And then you can proceed with a petition at the international level and, attempt to redress any sort of human rights violation that you think has occurred. So there are different kind of procedural requirements that you have to meet to move forward with that sort of action. But there is definitely an overlap. So usually domestic lawyers will proceed with something internally or within their domestic system. And then if that doesn't lead to the result that they would like, or if there is an opportunity to proceed at the international level, they may do so.
So, well, let's talk about why you got into this. Let's talk about where you grew up. Okay,
let's do it. So I grew up in Madison, New Jersey, as you know. Happy to say, was born in France. We were there beforehand. And obviously I don't remember very much from that time because we left when I was 3 years old.
Right.
But I would say...
He was bilingual at that point. It was the cutest thing. We would go into the Stop and Shop or whatever it was called, and for 2 weeks, when we were leaving, he would say to the cashier, "Merci," like that. But then it stopped because when you're learning a language, I could go on and on about this, you have to use it. And when you're 3 years old, you're not thinking, oh, I want to continue my French, right? So yes, grew up in Madison, New Jersey.
Childhood stories.
Graduated from Madison High School, and it was a very Wall Street town.
Sure, it was a big finance town, I suppose you could say. I mean, I would just say, we were being born abroad and then growing up around journalists who were interested in sort of lots of different issues, whether it be domestic political issues, international issues. I kind of always just had a curiosity for how those sorts of things affect people on a human level, and I would see a lot of the advocacy that you would do in your job with immigrants and human trafficking and things like that, and it was very inspiring to me. And I say it all the time that I think you were really sort of the inspiration for me to go to law school in the first place, because you bought me a book called Just Mercy that I read when I was considering it, and I think from there I just was really curious about the power of the law and what it can do to help others. And so that's kind of the start of what led to this really long process that I didn't expect to become as long as it has. But it's a long educational process.
You will say you made a decision to go to Indiana University. How did that happen? You were sitting there in New Jersey.
Well, you're from Indiana, and
that's right.
I grew up going to Indiana all the time. I love Indiana. Hoosier State is great. And yeah, I think more than anything, that was just visiting the campus and really liking how it looked, and thinking it could be a great experience for me. But,
And you had a great 4 years in Bloomington, I think.
Yeah, I love Bloomington. I've been wanting to go back. It's been a while. I think you probably agree Bloomington's a great place to be. And yeah, I think I did learn some things that definitely influenced like how I think about these different issues. I was a political science major and economics major and did a lot of sort of international studies within that as well.
Because I talked about it.
Because you talked a lot about it, and it was definitely a source of inspiration for sure. And yeah.
Boy, you're being nice. What a good son.
You know, I can give credit where credit is due.
I kept hoping that he would play lacrosse there too, because they had club at that point.
Oh,
But he
Lord.
just really wanted to be an academic.
I mean, yeah, I wanted to study and have fun. Those were the really two goals. I didn't really want to add something further into that, which I did. I think I accomplished that.
I know, in the world of lacrosse, is just, we shouldn't go into that. But
Jamie got tired of guests complimenting Mike, so she's like, I'll get one for me this time.
But anyway, so, you got out. I can remember when we were talking about you being a prosecutor. Do you remember that?
Well, I definitely started out being most interested in criminal law.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously reading Just Mercy and then kind of studying that stuff in law school, I did some internships that were heavily related to criminal law. So I did an internship with the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project, which was really interesting.
The Mid-Atlantic, because you tend to talk quickly because it was the Mid-Atlantic because, why was it the Mid-Atlantic? You want to say where you went to law school maybe?
Sure, yeah. I went to George Washington University Law School in Washington, D.C. And that was a really convenient circumstance because actually they had the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project within one of the buildings of the school. So it was really easy to get involved and was really interested in seeing what the process was for advocating for people who had been wrongly convicted, things like that. And it was a really good experience.
Where did they send you to? Remember when you were telling me about those experiences and
Yeah, I mean, we frequently went into Baltimore. I mean, was the closest, and a lot of the work that they did involved sort of people from Baltimore or situations that had happened in Baltimore. So we frequently would go into Baltimore to chat to different leads about cases we were following up on, things like that. And every once in a while we would, go talk to inmates as well. And
so did you go into the prisons?
yeah, a few times.
It's kind of where they are.
Yeah.
Mike, this is where I want to go. I want to go into Westville, Miami, Pendleton. We just had a Fort Wayne inmate at, I'll bring it up later. I think he was in Miami, confirmed it on Facebook, on Nosy Neighbors of all places, that Trinidad Ramirez was stabbed in the neck and he died. It was just happened in the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
Now, what he did here was horrible, all right? But when you go to an Indiana prison, do you really deserve to be killed? No.
I would agree.
Well, if a judge orders it, but we...
If a judge... Oh my gosh.
I haven't.
This is going to go into
I will choose to not have any comment on that.
And he's just, I haven't even written him up yet because I haven't gotten the information necessary on that. But so, all right, so you're there at IU, and then, you were a poli-sci and economics major, and then, you did the whole, taking the LSATs. What was that like for the kids out there who want to be attorneys? Give them some advice.
It's terrible. It's really not a fun experience. I'm not sure what.
I would agree. Agree.
I'm sure you had a similar experience. I remember the day of the LSAT specifically because you were with me, and it was a terrible experience because
The one when we went up to Notre Dame?
we went to Notre Dame. You can tell stories about me. I can tell stories about you. We're driving up to Notre Dame to take the LSATs, and once we arrive, she has lost my ticket for me to get into the test.
Oh, no.
I thought you were the one who lost it. See, this is
No, that's fundamentally incorrect. You were, in fact, I remember you specifically.
never go against a lawyer, I tell you.
You specifically were the one who wanted to hold on to it because I think I can quote you in saying you would lose it. And then somehow we get there and you lost it. And so then I had to proceed to sprint around Notre Dame's campus in the summer trying to find a building that I could print out my ticket in. I finally
Which we did. We prevailed.
We did. We did prevail.
Of course, I was right there the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I eventually.
That was a heart stopper, that one.
Yeah, I eventually got into the aquatic center, and I went into the ticket counter lady, and she managed to print off my ticket, and then I sprinted across campus to where my test was. So that was my experience.
Sit down there and calm down and take the LSAT.
Did she find the ticket later?
I don't think so. I don't think it was ever seen again. I'm not sure, but
Don't remember.
I don't think it was.
It's just a whole series of experiences and episodes when you're raising boys.
But prior to that, I would say, I think for anybody, wanting to go, I think you get used to the days of having like a prep book that you have to read through. You do practice exams, lots and lots of practice exams. I think you would probably say as well, for anybody who wants to be a lawyer, it's just a series of arduous and very not fun tests that you have to take. That's kind of the process. But
I know
Law has a lot of that.
yeah, there's unfortunately
The bar exam is a pain.
Yes, the bar exam is also not a fun experience.
So you passed the DC bar.
Yes, yeah.
How many did you pass it your first time?
Yes, yeah, I did.
Proud of you, boy.
I appreciate that. 4 years,
And everything
couple years
costs
late,
so
but I
much
appreciate
money,
it.
You know, whenever you take the LSAT. One of your old books, I actually went on the Probable Cause Facebook page and offered it up. I said, I've got this book here. We don't need it anymore. Would anybody want it? And some lady snapped it right up. I met her down at the corner of the courthouse and gave it to her.
I did not know that.
And this is why I'm trying to advocate all the time for us to have
Here we go.
an extension of the IU Law School here in Allen County. It would give our kids here a better chance. Well, if you have a law school, you can also have paralegal training. You could have, we have a number of universities and colleges here that have criminal justice as one of their courses of study, and it could all interlock, and it would be really, really good. And yet nobody ever answers my emails. And I even talked to one of our justices of the Indiana Supreme Court, Derek Moulter, about this when Brock and I bumped into him a number of weeks ago now. And so far, nothing has budged, nothing has happened. I don't know what to do about it.
Well, I'll be rooting for you.
I know.
I believe in you.
Well, I mean, it's to further education, further enlightenment, keep up the liberal arts. This is one of my rants, so you should watch it. Anyway, so you go to law school. What was your favorite course that you took at George Washington University Legal School?
Oh man, I really liked torts. Torts was really, really interesting because you sort of just dive into stories of really interesting and odd characters who have somehow gotten themselves into weird situations. And
Do they read like novels, kind of?
Sometimes
they can. I mean, a lot of other courses I think can be really sort of dry and a little bit boring. And I remember, struggling to maintain focus in administrative law. That was a difficult one.
civil procedure.
Civil procedure, evidence it depends. It really depends a lot as well on who your professor is. And I had a very sort of charismatic professor, so that was helpful as well. But I mean, yeah, I would say
You had a charismatic professor for which course?
torts.
Torts. Oh,
Torts,
okay.
yeah, torts. Was
You want to name him? Is he still there?
Sure, yeah. His name is Jonathan Turley. He's
Oh, yeah.
I was going to ask you if you had
Yeah.
him as a prof. He's frequently on, I know, Fox News.
Right.
And I don't know if he's on some of the other shows as well.
yeah,
But he's a great spokesperson for the law and explaining things.
yeah, absolutely. He's very good at being very entertaining when he talks about the law. And that's what he would do with these torts cases that were really, really interesting on their own, but then he would kind of tell stories as he did it as well. So yeah, it was a really interesting professor to have. And then I was actually in law school when he was involved with the impeachment proceedings.
Oh, okay.
So it was interesting because I would have him in class and I would see him
On TV.
in Congress doing the impeachment. So it was really, really interesting. An interesting time.
He was the one that probably was on television the most. Were there any other of your professors that we used to see?
Oh Lord, I don't know. I didn't really keep track of, I think a lot of times professors, their claim to fame is posting or publishing an op-ed in something or something like that. But
Well, they have to, don't they? I mean, that's
Yeah.
a requirement.
yeah. But yeah, no, I really did enjoy torts, and criminal procedure was another one I actually found pretty interesting as well.
Is that the Miranda rights? Criminal procedure?
Yeah, as soon as we get into anything into that area, I'll let you speak to that. But yeah, yes, it gets into that.
Got to have the Miranda rights. Fought long and hard for those. So, all right, so you going there, you spent 3 and a half years, because we did go to the graduation. That was fun, and Eileen was there. And then what did you do before you became, you got involved in human rights? I'm trying to think.
Sure, yeah. So I made a series of pretty interesting decisions, I would say. I think probably not advisable to your average graduate. I graduated and was considering an opportunity I had at a criminal law firm in Virginia.
Should have taken it. You could have made some money.
This is why I shouldn't have brought this up. I should have just not even mentioned that. But I was really, really curious about looking at human rights. I mean, the whole reason why I was interested in the law was just kind of learning about different ways that it can be used, both to deal with, whatever harms a specific individual has suffered, but also like how can it lead to more like structural changes and reforms. And I felt like I had learned a decent amount about that, but maybe wanted to just learn more. And so I found an opportunity to do work as like a researcher for a coalition of human rights advocates that work with Haiti specifically.
Oh, okay.
And they needed help writing a research sort of advocacy piece that got published on Jurist.
Nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I didn't even know this, okay?
Well, we can cut this out, but you definitely did because I shared it to the family group chat. You
Maybe I
you absolutely did know that, but we can, that's fine.
Well, didn't you have another job
I
that
see
actually
how much you paid.
paid the bills?
Well, right. So no, I've I think for me in particular, but I think a lot of people in general, you find that when you look into this sort of field and work, there's not really a lot of paid opportunities initially in sort of the human rights kind of space. But so yeah, and a lot of these organizations, they're kind of scrounging for funding. They don't really have a lot of permanent positions for people. And so a lot of it is just continuing to gain experience in internships and things like that. And I've done a lot of that. And so yeah, my first experience was with this coalition of human rights advocates that do work with Haiti. And that was a really good opportunity for me to learn about what the Inter-American system is, like generally what human rights bodies are, because at GW Law, frankly, I actually didn't really learn that much about that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there are opportunities to do so. I actually didn't know what the Inter-American Commission was. I didn't really know what any of that sort of stuff was. And so it's kind of just through research on my own and finding opportunities like the researcher position that I was given some hand-on experience learning about what these different bodies do and how they can be used to kind of try to achieve these sort of structural systemic changes. At least that's always the hope anyway.
Yes, I mean, Haiti is definitely a challenge
Right,
in just about every...
Right, they continue to deal with a lot of really, really challenging issues. But it was fascinating. I really got to learn about a different part of the world and see how the law can be applied there. And I think for me, that was something that just kind of clicked, that I was like, oh, okay, I might be really interested in looking at this as my career kind of going forward. So that led to...
But you were paying the bills by working for like a consortium too. Can you?
I've done.
And that was actually a really good experience. It just wasn't what you wanted to do ultimately, I don't think.
Generally speaking, I've done sort of other things as well that have like helped.
Oh, and he also took in dogs for Rover.
Well, that was something that started in law school.
He loves dogs so much.
That was something that
you
started
can make
in
some
law
money
school.
doing
Yeah.
that.
You can. I learned that you can watch people's dogs through like an app on your phone, and I love dogs. And I was like, well, I'm broken in law school, so this might be a great way to make some money. And ever since, I have continued to do that. Ever since, whenever I'm being in DC, I can use the app, and it's great if you work from home, especially too. I don't need to go into a huge story about Rover, but yes, I did watch dogs.
You can set your own hours, and
you set your own hours. You have a pal if you're have a long day at work, and they can hang out with you, and it's great. You know?
I think they have Rover here too. I mean, they have it everywhere, and
yeah, I mean, I think they're everywhere. It's like a national. It's an app you can use. I think wherever there's Rover watchers.
I know it pops up on my phone every once in a while. So then. So, I mean, if you could name any of the groups that you worked for, it would be great. But if, you feel like that's not the right thing to do, then don't do it. But so you worked for the Haiti Commission. Then what happened after that?
I would just say I've had a load of internships and a lot of like entry-level experiences, and I've done that with places a lot within the Inter-American system. So from the Haiti group, I went on to have an internship at the Inter-American Commission. And then from there, I've gained experience in places like SAHIL, which is an acronym in Spanish for Center for Justice and International Law.
Where are they located or based?
They're in DC. A lot of these organizations are
Most
in
of
DC.
them are in DC. Okay.
And then just kind of continue to kind of gain into different entry-level positions with places like Legal Action Worldwide and Human Rights Watch. So just generally continuing to
Yeah, and
make
those two are
progress.
quite well known, I think.
Yeah, they're really interesting because they kind of are the two sides of the same coin that I was talking about before, where one does sort of legal work that is the advocacy in and of itself, and then the other one is doing advocacy work with the information and documentation on the ground. So they're kind of different ways to be engaging with human rights issues to try to achieve change.
Well, here's what they say are the key responsibilities for a human rights lawyer. And
Okay.
we'll say where you fit in.
Let's hear them.
All right. Advising clients, informing individuals about their legal rights and obligations and how the legal system works. You can represent clients taking legal action to protect their interests in courts, tribunals, and administrative bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Investigating cases, interviewing witnesses, taking statements, and gathering evidence. Also, writing legal documents, drafting court documents, and other legal paperwork to support cases. Researching, analyzing legislation and case law to build a strong case. Negotiating, working with lawyers representing other parties to reach an agreement. And policy and law advocacy, working to shape and implement laws to ensure equality and civil rights for all. So in that, on all those parameters, where would you say you kind of settle?
Well, I think you really covered all the bases there, actually. And I think that's kind of my point, is that different organizations engage in different sort of aspects of this.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's being...
Are you doing a lot of research, for instance?
Yes, I think that's a key part of pretty much anywhere you are. I think, as a domestic criminal lawyer, I think it's very straightforward what you have a case, you make your way through the proceedings in court and stuff like that. In human rights, and particularly international human rights, a lot of it is sort of revolving around a voluntary system of countries agreeing to be bound by these treaties or these different regional bodies. And I think it's a lot less straightforward how you choose to sort of ply your trade, what sort of forums you're trying to engage with, what is your approach to the issue. It's a little bit more of a, like I was saying, amorphous kind of thing. And you sort of find whatever your niche is. And I think I've had experiences kind of doing the more strictly legal work where you're kind of doing research, where you're putting together petitions or briefs that you're going to submit before some sort of international body. Or you're doing the sort of just more advocacy research sort of style stuff, and you use your training to kind of make conclusions as to what rights might have been violated and things like that you use for advocacy purposes.
I mean, because I can imagine like all these countries out here that belong to the UN human rights. And, there's things going on in all these countries, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, what about, Argentina is now going to put out an arrest warrant for somebody in another country, and they'll say, but wait a minute, your record isn't so great either. Or I don't suppose Russia does. I mean, they stand aloof of all this stuff because they break every rule, but, or they seem to. But some of these other ones, for Israel, for example, you've got, that's a hot topic right now. I realize that. There's a lot of people in there who disagree with the prime minister, and so how would they fit in when their prime minister is getting criticized, and yet they are advocating for human rights elsewhere, and pointing the finger at, say, Iran, or they're pointing the finger at Iraq, or one of those other, Syria, for God's sake. Look at what went on there. Mm-hmm. Now, who is trying to right the wrongs of Syria? As I said, I attended a trial for a short time for a Syrian terrorist when I was in May, when I was in Paris. And,
Sure.
He supposedly was involved in killing 4 human rights attorneys in Syria who were Syrian. And so who gets to point the finger? Maybe that's what it boils down to. There must be a lot of how dare you going on. Wouldn't you say, Mike?
Well, I think there's an old saying about the winner writes history.
Oh, I like that one.
It's actually a pretty,
The winner writes history.
It's a pretty germane point when it comes to how all of that stuff functions, because that whole multilateral system, whether it's human rights, whether it's international trade, what have you, is a system that has been devised by the sort of winners of World War II and how they wanted that system to look like. And so how the powers kind of play amongst themselves within that system, again, really sort of builds off of who are the powers within that system. If you look at the UN Security Council, the countries that are within that as permanent members are pretty much just sort of the victors of World War II.
So you're talking about the UK,
Yeah, and so there's
United States,
right. If you're gonna put me on the spot about all the members,
France,
yeah,
Russia.
Yeah.
Russia, of all things. Okay.
So that's my point. But I would just say,
And they gave themselves veto power.
right, they all have veto power. So
There you go.
exactly. So a lot of these systems are definitely devised in ways that feel inequitable now.
It must take like an enormous effort to get anything in front of the International Criminal Court, which is
Well-
based in The Hague, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
just to kind of speak to your initial point about who gets to point the figure, there's some sort of saying, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it's basically a saying that 50% of international law is politics. It's a much more sort of political body, I think, or a political sort of thing than strictly domestic law is. And there's a lot of sort of using it for your own purposes. And, I guess it can depend on what you consider international law. There's kind of different sort of soft forms of law versus hard forms of law,
Oh,
where
okay.
hard law, I kind of just mean binding. So if there's something that occurs, like a domestic court ruling, like that's binding, you have to abide by that. And then there's sort of varying degrees of bindingness that you'll see within the international system. And so things like UN Human Rights Council's resolutions, that might feel technically it is binding, but then to what extent do decisions that are made within that framework lead to these changes or force these countries to make those
I was going to say,
changes?
who's enforcing them?
So right, it's the level of enforceability really depends. I mean, if you're talking about the ICC, if you're talking about universal jurisdiction, which is something that you were talking about, that can depend on, if you are able to detain the person that is going to be held in trial, then you have a real possibility if you proceed with a trial against them to put them in prison, because that's
So with
That's
this
international.
Syrian terrorist, which I can't remember his name right now, he did get 10 years. I found that out because I Googled him. And you can also find that on the Probable Cause, that story.
Yeah.
What he did was he made the big mistake, I was telling Rob, that he came back to France. And then France decided that they were going to take him to court.
Right.
I don't know how they were allowed to do that. And then they gave him 10 years. So what he did was in Syria.
Right.
But
so
then he came to France. He was supposedly going to go to school, a university somewhere. I think he went to Marseille, where they all go. And the next thing you know, he's sitting in the box, listening to somebody, testify against him. And boy, it was interesting.
yeah, no, there's a lot of interesting.
So other countries will just take it upon themselves to say, "Wait a minute, you're an international criminal, and we're going to adjudicate." Is that what happens?
Yeah, you're basically what you're touching on is there's a principle in international law called universal jurisdiction.
Okay.
And the basic idea is that there are certain crimes that are so heinous and recognized as international crimes that under what you would call a pure form of universal jurisdiction, you can prosecute that individual regardless of where they are or where the crime occurred. Not a lot of countries have what you would call a pure form of universal jurisdiction because political considerations don't really make it doesn't become something that really makes it that feasible, or it becomes something that becomes politically onerous if you have a pure form of universal jurisdiction. So a lot of countries have varying degrees of universal jurisdiction, and France is one where if the individual is on French territory, then you can bring them in for a trial, and this will be in regards to certain crimes that are considered heinous under international law. That would be war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, things to that extent.
Well, I did hear them say that there was a massacre.
Right.
A man who was testifying against this character, who was they put people in a glass box over there. He said, after I saw the massacre, and of course it's all in French, and there was an Arabic translator too. And I'm like writing my notes and everything else. And then I hear that après j'ai vu le massacre. And I'm just like, oh my God, is that what I heard, you know? And
Yeah.
it was far more interesting than going to Kim Kardashian, probably, because she was on the same day and I couldn't get a ticket in there. They said, no, we're full up. We're so sorry. But try this one, you know? And so I went to it.
I mean,
so what does it take to get a case in front of the ICC? That's the International Criminal Court, which you do read about that one, I think, a lot more than any of the others. They seem to be kind of binding.
It's in the headlines a lot these days. I mean, there was an arrest warrant issued for Netanyahu, and that created a lot of headlines and controversy, and there's been other sort of headlines to that extent as well.
Is there one for Putin?
Yeah, there's one for Putin. There's one for Putin.
And then people are saying they should have one against Trump.
You know, I have no comment on whether that.
What about the guy from Iran? Do they have one out for him?
It strikes me that what would be really difficult in this area is how you define success, because you don't have as defined jurisdictions and boundaries as to what you do. I mean, for what we do, the crime occurs. We have very good infrastructure to arrest people, hold them for trial. Their due process rights are very clearly spelled out.
Right.
And if our burden of proof is very well spelled out. If we're successful, what we do with them as far as punishment, whether they go to prison or into probation or something, is very clear. It sounds like a lot of this has some just awful jurisdictional issues that would to me, it sounds like it would be very frustrating to try to operate in that system because you don't have that support of, if you issue a warrant, what is your basis to go pick up Putin or Netanyahu?
Yeah, I think I should take a step back talking about what these different bodies of law who are they're binding towards. So, because you're right, it does lead to a lot of different jurisdictional issues. I think human rights law, the general idea is that it is binding on states. And the way that you kind of determine jurisdiction is whether there's various tests that have been used in international law at the European level, the inter-American level, spelling out some sort of notion of obviously territorial jurisdiction, whatever happens within their countries, and then wherever they exercise effective control, or they have state agents on the ground that are carrying things out. So there are different sort of more complicated tests that are really just in place to even figure out where there is jurisdiction. And then it gets even more complicated if you're bringing in issues around armed conflict. So there have been cases about incidences that have happened with boots on the ground in the Middle East, and whether or not certain nations had effective control in the countries that they were in. So that does get complicated, but there has been case law that kind of spells out where there is jurisdiction over issues that have occurred pertaining to states or not. Similarly with the ICC, there is a sort of test regarding whether or not there's jurisdiction based on, is the member or is the country that's involved a state party? If they are not a state party, is the act that they are sort of responsible for, the commission of crimes that they're responsible for, did that occur in a state party?
When you say state party, what does that mean? Not everybody's going to know what that means.
Sure. So, yeah, because it's really easy to kind of jump from like piece to piece with these different sorts of things. But basically, a lot of these systems within the international sphere start out as sort of voluntary systems. You have to agree to be bound by a treaty body, what have you. And so the Rome Statute, which is the statute that created the ICC, is one of the pretty, not universally, but it has a large state party membership. And so all of those states that have signed the Rome Statute are agreeing that if they have individuals under the jurisdiction's court, or under the court's jurisdiction, that they can be bound and found guilty of war crimes or what have you if they commit those crimes. At the same time, if another state commits those sorts of crimes in their country, then even though that country is not a member or a state party to the Rome Statute, they can still be brought in jurisdictionally because they committed it on the territory or on persons from the state party, if that makes sense.
So do you have an example of that?
Yes. Now I'm on the spot, so I just want to think about this for a second. But Yeah, there are jurisdictional issues.
Would that be extrajudicial killings by any chance?
Well, for example,
Well, I think that's are you talking about Venezuela right now?
Well,
With
I was
the-
talking about, remember when I hate to bring up Iraq and everything, but didn't the Bush administration kind of get accused of this stuff with the special renditions or whatever, where they would pick up somebody in a country and then take them for,
Well,
that person.
we're still dealing with people from 9/11 that are in Gitmo
yeah,
that they haven't figured out the appropriate jurisdiction to deal with them. You get into other ones that are what I would call like the Roman Polanski case. That's more of a traditional criminal act, not an act of terrorism or against humanity. But it took to try to get him back from France for a crime.
You know who
And-
that is, Roman
Polanski, I
Polanski?
don't.
He was a director, movie director, and then was accused of sexually assaulting an underage girl in California.
okay.
So he was, I think, actually Polish originally, but he lived in France.
Right. Well, he went to France, but I don't know whether he's an American citizen or a Polish citizen. He was definitely Polish.
But then a more recent one was the WikiLeaks founder
Yes.
who hid in somebody's embassy for quite a while, as well as was indifferent, and who was, Snowden, who fled to Russia, I think is still in Russia.
Yeah.
I mean, you get jurisdictionally, these cases are like a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I can give like
Julian Assange.
Yeah.
there are times within like the human rights sphere more specifically where these things can be a bit more cut and dry, where basically an individual will say that in some way their government or the state has done something to harm their rights, a group of individuals' rights, what have you, and then that can make its way through the Inter-American Commission, proceed to the Inter-American Court, what have you. And then there are examples of, particularly for countries from Latin America, actually, that have had sort of a history of dictatorships and wanting to embrace international law. I'm thinking of Chile, for example, or other countries like that, where once those issues have been highlighted and addressed, it has led to those governments to make policy changes, to lead to more structural reforms. That is more difficult to do, for sure, because it is, again, somewhat of a voluntary system. And that can be the frustrating thing with international law in general, is that particularly in the times we live in now, there are sort of a lot of think pieces and articles about, are we seeing the demise of international law? It seems like the multilateral system is sort of falling apart to some extent, and there's a lot of debate about that. But again, I would say it's definitely a lot more of a headache, for sure. And it really just depends what form of international law, human rights specifically, or international criminal law. The jurisdictional bases are somewhat different. Who it binds is somewhat different. States versus individuals, things like that.
Well, how did we get the right to take the Honduran president, bring him here, put him on trial for drug dealing? That's one thing that I never quite understand, how we can do that. I mean, you know, he's not a citizen. This is Juan Orlando Hernandez, who just got a pardon, you know, but he was brought here. He was the Honduran president when he was charged with this massive drug trafficking scheme. And then we bring him here and we put him on trial. Where does the U.S. get the right to do that?
Well, I don't want to speak on the particulars of that case because I know nothing.
No,
about
but I mean, and then we also had, what's his face, and who was it in Panama there for a while?
Noriega.
Noriega. I mean, he was another one that we brought here.
Yeah.
You know, obviously considered an international criminal, but where do we get the right to do that? That's what I'm trying to figure
I
out.
think there's a saying about might makes right.
Well, there.
Yeah. Well,
We have to right now, Mike, and we better figure this one out.
that's not anything under the sort of purview of international rights, international criminal law, because what he was found of was violating like domestic criminal statutes and things to that extent, I believe.
I think.
So he was extradited, and that's a kind of different sort of area. But you do get into it, right? So that's kind of a separate
It's
category.
confusing, no?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways that these things can be addressed, I suppose. But I think it gets into an interesting area where there are some U.S. statutes that do kind of speak to international human rights obligations. And you can proceed in domestic litigation and try to tackle some of those issues within the domestic system, if you would like, which is an interesting area.
So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Maduro, who is the president and dictator of Venezuela, because, you know, there's all kinds of threats being made toward him right now. I understand that he has spoken to President Trump, which I find interesting. But they're saying, yeah, we're going to send the tanks in there. We're already, you know, taking care of the boats that they say are, you know, drug traffickers and whatnot like that. But will he be one of these that we're going to bring here and try him? I mean, is that possible? I mean, doesn't he? Well, okay, let's put it this way. Does he have to break some kind of an international law for us in America to be able to bring him here?
I think if we're, so, because it's, I think it helps.
Here I am putting this whole question on my son.
No, but I think what helps clarify these issues is if you're trying to think about what someone has, generally speaking, if you're trying to think about what wrong has occurred or whatever, you kind of think of it in like an org chart sort of way. So, okay, what happened? Are you concerned about human rights violations against someone's due process rights? Are you worried about systemic violations of certain rights recognized under international treaties? Well, then you're probably talking about international human rights law, and the perpetrator there is a government, what have you. If you're concerned about things that fall under the sort of rubric of international criminal law, which again is things like genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, then
torture.
Yeah, and as a constituent crime in some of these other things, yeah, and you can seek individual criminal liability for those things against particular individuals. And so there's a kind of different rubrics. And then there are other things that kind of involve international matters, but maybe don't fall within one of those sorts of rubrics. So I think, you know, I think the more...
Well, it depends on who defines the terms.
Yeah, what harm are you trying to fix, and what way are you trying to go about it is really kind of the starting point for a lot of this stuff. And then from there, you kind of define what your approach is. You look what jurisdictionally is available and things like that. So
there was an interesting thing when I interviewed a French judge, and he told me how you're chosen as a judge in France. You go to school for this. It's the least political type situation, in my opinion. But some of the laws that they had to change within their countries come from the European Union. You know, and I'm trying to remember which exact one he told me about, because it is in the interview, which I should show again because it was interesting. And, you know, so they're governed not only by French law, but also by European Union law.
Right.
And which one takes precedence is kind of like the key.
yeah.
So let's just go over some of these big ones, because we are running out of time, so that I'm not going to get to go on my rant about Indiana prisons, because I know at least 4 people who were killed in prisons within the last year or died there in suspicious circumstances. So international organizations, we have Amnesty International. We have the Human Rights Watch, which definitely I've heard of. United Nations Human Rights Office, which that's where I think it could get really sticky, you know,
Yeah.
with one nation pointing the finger at the other. We have something called the International Federation for Human Rights, a federation of 188 human rights organizations from 116 countries. You familiar with that one?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. We have the International Committee for the Red Cross, which they protect the lives and dignity of victims of armed conflict and violence.
That's, again, that's not really a human rights organization. It's sort of like a legal body that monitors conflicts and kind of speaks to humanitarian law, which is a bit different. But yeah, they are an important institution for sure.
And they have a very good museum in Geneva, which I did take you to when you were a baby, and you probably don't remember it.
I don't.
But, you know, I'm glad it's there. And the Red Cross got started in the Crimean War. So
I did not know that.
yeah, well, that was part of what I learned there. Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, provides emergency medical care to people in crisis zones. They are brave. And the national regional organizations are the ACLU, which is very active here in Indiana.
Yeah, I mean that gets again into like, yeah, there are domestic ways to.
What do you know? Comment over there. You're not supposed to like the ACLU. Didn't you know that?
people who brought us a new jail.
That's right. And I mean, let's admit it, we needed one. All right, no problem.
Well, I think ultimately we needed one.
Yeah.
Yes, but having it shoved down our throats is another story.
Well, that was a
How do you define success in this area? It seems like it would be like you're a combination of a lobbyist for us to look at our better selves, and you're up against some very structured
Evil.
local interests, protective of your own country. Nationalism is, I think you kind of referenced this, maybe stronger today than it was at the end of World War II, when there was at least a sense of we can do better than this and we're all together.
Yeah.
And I know within the United States, there's a lot of criticism of a lot of the United Nations stuff. It seems like we look at our country and say, we've probably got the best criminal justice system, the fairest civil justice system. We protect more rights than anyone, and yet we've got all these people pointing fingers at us and saying how awful we are, and frequently from countries that actually do physically punish gay people and handicapped people and anyone who's different from the majority.
Yeah.
And yet we sometimes it's almost like we're doing a circular firing squad, that we're so critical of ourselves that we are not valuing the good things that we do. The fact that we have procedures in place, like the Various Innocent Project, to look at wrongful convictions.
Watchdog.
A lot of offices have created internal offices to look at their convictions. We've tried to put in an awful lot of safeguards on our criminal justice system, and we certainly have passed a lot of laws to protect various forms of self-identity and ethnicity, religious, all of that. So some of these organizations that seem to be so critical of the United States, I think there's a lot of people within the United States that don't give them a lot of credence, because they find the stuff you're criticizing us for will get your head chopped off in certain countries.
Yeah. I mean, there's a spectrum to all of this, I would say. I think a lot of country states would agree that, generally speaking, the U.S. is a place that has a fairly healthy democracy, has a pretty healthy legal system. It has its issues, but of course, has been a standard bearer for a lot of other places. I think
We are a beacon unto the world. We need to stay that way.
Well, yeah, it's becoming. Yeah, I would just say I think the U.S. has had a really complicated, from my experience, from my learning, from what I've seen anyway. They have a very complicated relationship with institutions of international law that, in some ways, they've kind of served as like a linchpin for a lot of these institutions, whether it's providing funding to the UN or to the regional systems, or just kind of speaking prominently about them. At the same time, whenever there's sort of a lot of times there's things that relate to domestic issues as well, such as there's different opinions on the death penalty and things like that. A lot more
Solitary confinement. That's my major thing.
In my experience, it's a lot more of the kind of dicier issues maybe around the United States, or where there's been advocacy or what have you, is what we choose to do abroad. And that, again, becomes something that leads to a lot more consternation about the U.S. not wanting to be held responsible for those things or not. I think when it comes to success, which was your original question, I've said this a lot, and it's probably a bit of a broken record, but I think it really does, because under the umbrella of whether it's human rights or international criminal law or what have you, it's a really, really broad area. If you say you're a domestic criminal lawyer, it's like, well, you're a prosecutor, you're a defense attorney, like it's cut and dry. If you tell someone you're a human rights lawyer, that may mean that you engage in civil litigation on a specific issue in the United States, and you have set metrics about what you want to change, what sort of bad actors you want to have to pay damages or what have you. And that's certainly something that does happen. You could also be someone that is trying to represent interests at the regional level at the Inter-American Commission, and you're trying to get a government policy changed. And so you say, this has led to, you know, there was a case, I can't remember the name, but it was specifically about different massacres that were happening in like a Latin American country, or the practice of enforced disappearances. And over time, that has led to structural changes in some of these countries, particularly ones that give good amounts of buy-in to the international system. So if that's your goal, it's more difficult, but there are things that have happened and there have been results of that. And you would call that generally something like strategic litigation at the international level. And then you have levels of it as well, where you're not even really engaging in litigation per se, but you're engaging with those different bodies like the UN Human Rights Council, you're engaging with treaty bodies. And there again, you're trying to engage more in
trade.
Trade, yeah, I mean, anything can really become kind of a forum for human rights issues if you want it to be. That's why it's less cut and dry. And so it really depends where you find yourself in the midst of all of that, what your goals are, and then there are real differences in terms of what feels tangible, ranging from a civil litigator up into a diplomat at the United Nations, you know, and there's ranges of what you can achieve and what you consider to be success, I would say.
So you really have to have the fire in the belly. So, all right, if you want to go to the right law school for this, you can go to any law school and be a human rights attorney. Don't even let anybody back you down. But there's somebody on Reddit that said George Washington, which is where he went, Georgetown, Princeton, Harvard, and Oxford. Okay.
Can I cut in here?
Go ahead.
Can I cut in here? I think this is, you know, I don't think anybody needs to be told that if you go here, I've always sort of despised the sort of like, if you go here and then end up with this rank and then do this and do that. I think I would cut that off and say, I think for anybody who's, you would have a lot of experience with this that you could speak to, but in my very, very limited experience, I think if you want to become some sort of public interest lawyer and you go to someone who's in that field and you show them that you care a lot about it and want to network and learn, I think that's like the absolutely like beginning step, and I wouldn't worry about necessarily where you're getting into law school or, I mean, so things matter to a certain extent, but
The basics of law, you don't have that many electives at law school.
Yeah.
Your first 2 years are pretty much played out with the basics.
Yeah.
And your last year you have a few things, but
Yeah.
it's not like you pick out a major the same way you do in undergrad.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I would, you know, that stuff all matters to an extent and do the best that you can, but I think showing people you're passionate about it in the field and like reaching out to them, I think is anything good that's happened to me is because I've just badgered people on LinkedIn or something, and I've been like, hey, can
Well, I'm
Well, you
just
get
glad
that honestly, I'd say.
Yeah. It's, you know, and most of those go ignored, and that's totally fine, and I understand, but people will appreciate that. And I think if someone hears they have to go to Oxford or something, they're gonna be like, well, this is never, you know, it's
Oh, I've got my own views on that too, because I usually go there every year.
okay.
And, well, no, UK is, didn't say Cambridge, that's interesting. So anyway, does anybody want to wrap this up? We haven't heard from my right hand. Well, we heard from her at the beginning. You know, it's because we've been going on, we could go on forever. on
Probably
this.
put her to sleep, to be honest.
Oh, I hope not.
Probably tired of hearing about this topic.
Go ahead, Mom.
No, is she gonna say anything?
It's really good to hear from your son. That was really good information.
Well, it's good to hear from you too.
We're fighting the good fight
Yeah.
all around.
Yeah.
We have to be out there. We have to care about other people. We have to make sure that their rights are not, you know, they're not, come on, give me the word. I need an ad.
Violated.
Violated, thank you. And I hate to think of that. And, you know, as I said, I was going to go on about, there's 4 or 5 people that I know were killed in Indiana prisons or died under suspicious circumstances. I don't really have enough time to bring it up today, but I will say out their names next week if we have the time, because it's inexcusable what's going on in solitary confinement. I don't think that, I'm not expecting Mike to totally agree with everything that I say. I'm sure he did an eye roll over there, but
It's very obvious where I get all of my senses from then.
Yeah.
It's been diluted a little bit, but it's there,
That's right. You got to speak up and speak out. So anyway, with that, if there's no more...
Oh, I was going to hit you up. Are you upset that the Louvre is going to charge non-EU people more to visit?
I didn't even know that.
Yep.
How much more is it, do you know?
I don't know how much.
I wonder if they had to... Well, they do have that one free day, Mike.
That could
It's
be.
either a Monday...
That may be gone for non-EU.
I'll get back to you on that one next week, but there's one day where you can go free, but of course the lines are like really, really long.
Yeah, this could be a human rights violation.
There you go.
There you go.
Against non-EU national.
Some kind of violation, that's for sure. My favorite statue in there, I'll let everybody guess for 30 seconds, and then I'll tell you which one it is.
In there?
Yes.
We're going to sit here 30 seconds.
I don't think I know the name of anything
It's
in there.
called La Victoire de Samothrace. She doesn't have her head anymore, but she's got her wings, and she's there right when you're going up, and they're outstretched like this, and she's looking up, and it means the victory of Samothrace, which is obviously in Greece somewhere. Just love it.
Interesting.
I'll post that on my yeah. All right, so let's get around to that, because unfortunately we have to say goodbye. This has been really fun. This is the Probable Cause. You can see us on the Facebook page, which is The Probable Cause. You can go on our website, which is www.theprobablecause.com. Sorry, I haven't had that many articles lately because there hasn't been that much to write out of Allen County or anywhere else. I did post something. I can't remember what it was. I posted an editorial that I wrote after I interviewed somebody from Honduras. It was like 6 years ago, after people were walking out and why they're walking out. And I did a lot of research on that. So you can go to our www, The Probable Cause. You can listen to our podcast on Apple or Spotify. It sure would be nice if you guys would subscribe and, tell us what you think. Every once in a while, I'm getting some feedback now. And with that, I will say from all of us here, goodbye. This episode is filmed and edited by Frosty Pictures. The Probable Cause is produced by Maumee Media.
Worried when I crossed the Michigan line, a cop from Steuben County waiting on I-69, a headlamp went out while he pulled me over, charged me with possession after I rolled down the window. Now that's skunk. Indians a trip when it comes to weed. It's like who doesn't smoke or use gummies? Your grandpa, your brother, your rich friend from school? Hell, throwing the whole courthouse and my attorney too. It's time those assholes change these stupid laws. It ain't worth the paper for a probable cause. Sitting on a bar stool in my usual place, this guy next to me said he was looking for some cocaine. Hell, I just sold him an 8-ball with a little piece off for me. But my buyer was a cop? Should have known he was a creep. So I'm a dealer, right? You gotta be kidding. It's a rich man's drug. I just take it because I'm injured. 8 years in Westville with a monkey on my back. There's more drugs in here than you can shake a shank at. One dirty drug test, man, this system's flawed. Undercover screwed me in my probable cause. Street crimes never did me no favors. I'm hooked on Fetty. I'm a junkie, not a felon. Told that son of a bitch on the way to lockup. I can't seem to shake it. I need help, not mocking. What do you want from someone who's been through the system? Drugs all through the house before mom and dad went to prison. Throw me in jail and give me a fine? Someday I'll be dead and away from your kind. Now I'm at the courthouse in front of a judge. Can't say my public defender cares for me much. Crimes are committed on both sides of the law. God help me now with this probable cause. C shift never gets old. Anything can happen when you're out on patrol. You think I'm just eating donuts, man? Give me a break. Nothing on this job is a piece of cake. Lights and sirens activated, this knucklehead wants to chase. Baby mama at the scene just spit in my face. Wife's worried that someday I won't be pulling up at all. You'll read about my killer in a probable cause. Man. She went through my phone and she seen my text. I told her forget it. It was just my ex. She took a swing and knocked me flat. Man, I went wild to get her back. Judge slapped me with a no contact order. Now she's got the kids and she's staying with her mother. So she started it all and I have to take the fall. You can read my whole story in the Probable when I was young. Caught a case for dealing and did my time. Yeah, I got a record, but I was doing fine. Running my own business on the southeast side. Yeah, I got a gun. I kept it on hand. Told the cop my reason, thought he'd understand. In this neighborhood, you need some protection. Attorney thought I could get just community corrections, but the judge decided to send me to prison. Can't get ahead no matter how hard I try. Read the probable cause, it'll make you
Whispers
cry.
and rumors that don't get reported. Stories I write that are often distorted. Got my notebook and pen, and I'm ready to listen. Tell me the truth, I'll consider your position. I've seen killers with eyes so cold and dead, and others go to prison because of what someone said, rotting away for the rest of their lives, leaving a hole here on the outside. Things are sad here on earth, and it's no wonder why, when you consider the sociopaths who remain in charge. It's me who sees the system for all its flaws, and I usually start with the probable cause. My right hand is reading the probable cause.